Hey everyone, thank you for joining me for yet another episode of the Unstoppable You podcast with me, your host Heather Beebe, right here on Disruption Network. Another episode brought to you by ejamoving.com. They are our local movers and there for you for whatever you might need. It's that time of year, you got students moving, they provide all your boxes. So check them out, ejamoving.com. Tonight I have a special episode, something I'm super passionate about. It goes right in line with everything that I've tried to do for this past year. The intention of my podcast, as we come, full circle in this year, has been to share stories, share people's real stories, not just stories, where you may hear it and it inspires you to be you. So everything from, sickness in the family to happiness in a family, uninvited surprises, uninvited changes, so many things. If you want to check out any of my older episodes, check out Disruption, or you can check out right here on the Facebook page as well. So they're all there. And again, I'm so thankful for tonight's episode. It is finally my full year in. I don't know how I did it, but I'm super thankful for that. And then also today is a special anniversary. It's the 3rd year anniversary of UnstoppableYouCoach.com. So I have been working as a coach and a trainer for the last 3 years with people truly, truly changing their lives. And as much as they think that I'm changing their lives, you're changing my life more than you imagine. So I'm thankful for that. 3 years doing that, 1 year doing this. And all of this, not that long ago, was just an idea in my notebook. So I appreciate all of you that continue to share my posts, to support me in ways of showing up at my retreats, my hikes, any of these events I have going on throughout the year here in New York State and also in Puerto Rico. So, and then just the humanitarian work in general that you constantly support me. So thank you. You've made it a full year on the podcast. So again, my intention of the show is always to share stories and hear stories from real people, just like you and I, making a difference in the world by being themselves. So tonight I have 2 really special guests. I have Kyle Smith, who is a cousin of Sean, and then Isaac Butler, who's a friend of Kyle's, which means he's a friend of mine. And they have agreed to come on tonight. These 2 guys live, both of you live in New York City, and you live down there as really powerful advocates for the gay communities. And I want you to explain a little bit more about what you do, what you stand for, and then we'll go from there. You want to start, Kyle? And thank you so much.
Yeah, super happy to be here. Hi, everybody who's watching. So I've been in New York City for 4.5 years. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, 2 small towns in Pennsylvania, and I am primarily a graphic designer and a photographer. And especially with my photography, I'm trying to bring as many gay and queer stories and people and models to the forefront as I can, because so many times we see all over, whether it's in cinema or in television or even in books, things are changing, but queer voices, particularly queer voices of color, don't have the same platform as white voices, as heterosexual voices. And so even when we get gay stories, they're often portrayed by gay actors, or they're done in such a way that they're not really reflective of the community. So I try to bring my experiences as a gay man to the forefront in my work.
Awesome.
And as for me, I'm Isaac. I'm originally from Michigan, just moved to New York a couple years ago. And right now my main passion is making more space for queer voices, specifically queer voices of color in television. It's an industry that I've recently broken into and have noticed how very straight and white it is. And I think that going back to kind of what Kyle was saying, if we want these stories to be accurate and effective, then the people behind the cameras also need to be people with those same stories. So that's something that I'm really passionate about right now. I'm still like very low on the chain of progress, but I'm working my way up slowly but surely.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so let's go back. So you're both from, Kyle, you're from smaller towns.
Mm-hmm.
And Isaac, are you from a smaller town in Michigan, or were you from a bigger town?
A pretty big suburb, but a pretty insular religious community. So a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I say it like that only because that's what I would understand. You know, like small towns sometimes present different challenges for people. So that in itself is like a little part of the story. I think that's crucial to understand, that it's still really important to be who you are, regardless of how many people like you are among you, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I don't know if you're interested to elaborate a little bit more on that, Kyle, how that was for you being in a small town, and how that like started for you.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that like my family has been amazing all the way through. You know, I received nothing but love and support from my parents, even my grandparents before they passed away, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. You know, Sean even said to me when I came out to them, it was years ago. This is after he was already been in Iraq. He said, "I can never be as brave as you." And I'm like, "What? You were fighting a war?" That to me was such. I'll never forget those words. That was such a huge thing for me, for him to say that. But growing up here, I think a lot of people figured out I was gay before I did, because I didn't have a word for it. I graduated high school in 2008, sort of at the beginning. This is like pre-Gaga, so kind of before. I think a lot of gay culture. I mean, it was still very frowned upon. I remember guys getting picked on and stuff in school, and I myself really, but I didn't realize it really until I was like 17, 18, that I was like, oh, maybe, you know, this is something that I actually need to pay attention to.
Yeah. And what about you, Isaac?
Well, I also came out later than most, and also didn't realize it until later than most. I realized it when I was in college, when I was 19. And I went to college in Wheaton, Illinois, at Wheaton College, which, if you know anything about it, is a very small Christian liberal arts school that always places in the top 10 least friendly to the LGBT community on the Princeton Review. So, like, great place to be gay. I'd highly recommend it. No. When I came out, I didn't think it was going to be that big a deal, because I didn't think it was that big a deal, and I was wrong. I came out publicly on a stage in front of a third of my school with 2 other seniors. I was a sophomore at the time, and then the school year ended. So when I came back the next year, I was the only out gay person at the entire school, and had a pretty rough time until graduation. But that was also when I came out to my hometown and my family. And that was difficult. My parents didn't accept it. And then I don't know how far you want me to get into my story right away, but
I think there's value in whatever you're willing to share, just because there's people out there with similar situations, and they may find comfort in hearing like how brave you are and what you're doing now, you know, because it's all part of it. It all matters.
Yeah. Okay. So the summer of my sophomore year, I was like out to people that asked, but I wasn't like going around saying, "Hey, I'm gay," just because I didn't feel like it was necessary. And after just seeing how the reaction that I was expecting wasn't the one that I got from my Christian college, I assumed that the same would be true for my Christian hometown and my community there. So I got a job at this resale store that was run by my old Christian high school, which was run by my church. And while I was there, I was sexually assaulted by a coworker. And he was fired, but then I was fired as well, with the reasoning being that because I was gay, I must have wanted it. And that's why I didn't report it until after it had happened. The person that assaulted me, repented for being gay. I did not. So I was not actually forced out of my church, but like I was not welcome. So I lost that entire community that I had grown up with from third grade all the way through my senior year of high school. Like all of those people lost all contact with. And I don't know what people have said about me in that community. I'm just assuming the worst, but I very much like went from feeling like everything's going to be okay when I come out to losing everything, not having supportive parents, not having supportive friends, and really just having to like start over in a sense. Lots and lots and lots of fighting to be accepted by my family. The best I got from my immediate family was my brother saying that he didn't really care. My sister cried when she found out, and my parents started suggesting reparative therapy, which, if you know anything about reparative therapy, which is sending gay kids to a camp to try to make them straight, usually it just makes gay kids kill themselves. So seeing that that was the option they thought was best for me was depressing and upsetting. But when I was at this point of everything kind of falling apart, I had to like decide, am I going to let things fall apart, or am I going to fight to exist, basically? And took a lot of effort, but chose to fight. So when I went back to college, my junior year, I started advocating very strongly for myself to exist on the campus. And slowly but surely, more people started coming out. Slowly but surely, we inched our way down from like number 2 to number 4 on the least friendly to the LGBT community. And by the time I graduated, I was exhausted. I literally graduated with only the exact amount of credits that I needed to graduate. But I got out of there and went back home and started working more on my family. It took a very, very, very long time. Like, I think maybe last year was when my parents finally reconciled their religion with me being gay. And now we have a very healthy relationship, but it took 5 years and a lot of work and a lot of wondering if this is just going to become like a greeting card type of relationship. But I attribute a lot of that to my parents really genuinely loving me, even if they didn't understand me, and me not just like cutting off the limb, you know, and giving up completely. And now I live in New York City. I'm very happy. I'm very gay. I have a great support net. And yeah, things are really good now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm super happy to hear that your family was able to see the value in the relationship of family and come through and grow the mindset. I think that there's something there that many people could learn from as their family members come to their true colors and be who they really are, to like accepting them and seeing like the ways that we want to control people or judge them, right? We would almost prefer sometimes to sever the relationship because it's not the relationship you wanted versus the relationship you have, you know? And so commend your parents for that, because that even if it wasn't easy, it's something that they were willing to face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you never experienced that, Kyle?
Not from my family. I grew up Catholic. I left the church around 14, which is about the same time I started figuring out, hey, maybe I like boys. And, you know, I grew up in an area that, you know, it's rural Pennsylvania, so it's a lot of Methodists and evangelicals and Catholics and you know, all kinds of people around here. And I lost my share of friends because they didn't understand why I was questioning God, why I was questioning, you know, the Bible, why I had left the church, why, you know, it was high school. I didn't come out until only to a select few people. It was more in college that I started to be more public with it. So it wasn't really about being gay for me, but in college I lost some friends, even though I went to a more liberal school. There was a couple of really good friends that I had freshman year that when I came out to them, they were just like, no. So in that area, it wasn't, like I said, from the family, it was different. And from me, it was never the question of, it was more like being afraid for me about, am I going to be safe? Am I going to find love? Is the world going to be accepting? Not so much like it. And there was still a journey to go on because they didn't understand what being gay was. As far as I know, the only, you know, gay person in the family, at least that we know of yet. So there was it wasn't ever a lack of love. It was just a lack of understanding. And I think that continues today too, because, my parents are, both in their 60s. They look like they're 40. But they grew up in a time when it wasn't as acceptable. Even though people knew, it was like whispers and, hushed words behind doors, and if it was never explicitly said. And, every generation, I've had the opportunity to connect with a bunch of older LGBTQ folks, mostly women, because a lot of the men died, frankly, because of the AIDS crisis in the 80s. We lost an entire generation of men. And, it's understanding that, like, the progress that they've made. I love history in general, so understanding gay history has been really important to me since I came out. But even especially in the last 50 years or so, we've made incremental progress forward. So, like, understanding where we were, we made a lot of, positive steps. There's still, there's gay people in every small town in America, all over the world. We exist. We're here. We don't know how many we are, because the administration still will not add LGBTQ questions to the 2020 census. So you have to wait until 2030 now, and hopefully whoever's in office then will add questions. We don't know how many gay people are in America, how many bi people, how many trans people. We don't know. So we know we're here. Frankly, if you go on Grindr in any zip code in the country, you're going to find people that will talk to you. But I know people who live in this area still that are not out to their family, and they're terrified, but they come out to me because they knew me growing up, and it hurts. I got lucky with my situation. With a lot of people, I know someone who was literally had a Bible thrown at him as he was being kicked out of his house. So,
yeah. I think it's you brought up a really valid point. We really don't know. And a lot of it, whether the census is there or not, I feel like we don't know, because there's people who still they have not come to terms with it. Mm-hmm. They don't choose to fight for themselves, and they see the battle of that as much more exhausting than hiding, their happiness, from whatever life they want. And it's terribly sad. But on the flip side, I see people, like my sister, for example, who's openly gay. When she was about, I think, 17 or 18, we're from a really small town. I mean, I graduated with like 38 students. My sister, she was the year ahead of me. And when she came home that summer with her first girlfriend, I was in Brazil at the time studying down there. And I heard that, like, this is prior to internet. Like, we had internet, but it was more like email and stuff. It wasn't really chatting and stuff. Mm-hmm. But immediately this big deal, and here it was our family again. Like, that I had an uncle who was also gay, who passed away from AIDS in the 90s, and it was another small town story. But he obviously moved to a bigger city, but that was a big deal when he was still living at home. And when I see that people come through and still embrace who they are, it's so awesome. But I love to see when they stay in small towns and they thrive. And I also have a very dear friend who stayed in my hometown. He'll probably watch this episode. He's so much fun, and I'm so proud of him, because he lives in this tiny, tiny town, and he's very, very happy. And he just got married this past year. And I love his story too, because he didn't go to a bigger city. He like stuck it out. And I'm sure that there's the challenges that, he just doesn't even pay attention to that are there, but who knows, maybe he thinks about them at night. I don't know. So, but I'm super proud of him for being there, because that's a challenge in itself. But so when you, Isaac, back to the university story, or, in college, when you look back and see, your choice to fight, not only, I guess it almost seems like you broke it up in sections. Like, let me take the care of like the school first, or my family after, or however you did that. Like, when you look back at that, what do you see as far as like the things that seemed impossible as they became possible? Like,
there was a while where I didn't know if I could stay. And it made a lot of sense to leave and just go find a public university where it wouldn't be a big deal that I was gay. But I have a personality where I don't like leaving things unfinished. and I don't like feeling like people are defeating me. So a lot of it, I just stayed out of spite. And also a good amount of it, I stayed because even though I was the only out gay person, I knew plenty of closeted kids on campus that did not feel safe. And in a lot of ways looked up to me for being willing to say, like, yes, I'm gay, deal with it. There are times where professors would like tell me in class that I was diseased, indirectly saying that like homosexuality is a disease. And then I would raise my hand and be like, so I'm diseased. And they would like try to walk it back, but not walk it back. And like, so I would have to deal with all that and then go and like write a paper for that same professor and like trust that they're going to be fair with me on my grade. There's a lot of challenges that came up in just knowing that the people that you were supposed to be respecting in this learning environment didn't respect you. And like the academic side of things on its own was difficult enough, but then just like the social aspect of it too was a real challenge. I think if I could go back and do it again, from a selfish standpoint, I would have stayed and not come out, just because even though I did end up doing a lot of good for a lot of other people, I suffered a lot in terms of my grades not being able to get me the jobs that I needed. Just the social aspect. And just feeling like, I don't know, exhausted. I was so tired after college for a very, very long time because I was like, if I wasn't sleeping, I was like yelling at somebody. I was trying to finish schoolwork. I was going to Boys Town secretly to drink, because that's a lot of how I coped with everything that I was dealing with, was a lot of drinking. Looking back on it, it's like I've told people this image of like climbing this mountain and looking back at like this dark, cloudy ravine and like not knowing exactly how you got out of there, but knowing that you did because you kept moving, and being proud of where you are now and seeing how you are a better person and a stronger person for getting out of that place. But sometimes I wonder why I stayed in the ravine for so long when there were plenty of times where I could have just like opted out. But then I don't know who I would be if I hadn't stayed and fought as hard as I did. So it's a toss up, you know?
Sure. So sometimes looking back, you know, the whole like, you know, rear view mirror vision is 2020 kind of thing, you know, have you had any realizations that were like, wow, that made sense, that was the way it needed to happen because of this or this? Like, did you have any situations present themselves after all of this that were like, if this hadn't happened, this wouldn't have been?
Mm-hmm. I know that my being out encouraged a lot of other people to be out. And as like the more people that came out, the more people that came out. It was just like a domino effect. So by the time I graduated, there was like a coalition of students that were out and vocal about it. We weren't allowed to have a gay straight alliance on campus because that promotes homosexuality, and that's against the rules that we signed every year, saying that we wouldn't promote homosexuality or participate in homosexuality, which I questioned a lot because I'm like, does existing count? Does talking to a male count? Like all these bros that are cuddling up on couches playing video games, is that homosexuality? That's, sorry, tangent. But
probably
the school was good at quietly getting gay kids out, but I was loud and I wouldn't leave.
Getting them out of the school.
Not like actively kicking them out, but just like suggesting very firmly that they leave. I know that happened to a lot of students. And a lot of it was like, you broke this community covenant that you signed, so like we can't have you in the school. So when I came out, I was very careful to like, of like everything that I was doing I needed to be perfect, because if I gave an inch, then this whole wall that I was holding up would topple down on me.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, I became very good at being gay in a space where nobody liked it. A lot of like knowing what time things close in town, so that's when you can walk around with somebody holding hands, or what bars you can and can't go to because faculty members might be there. That sort of like, it very much felt like a V for Vendetta situation where I'm like secretly trying to like live my life against people that don't want me to. And that became a challenge after I graduated, when all I knew was like this kind of undercover type of gayness that didn't really translate well in a world where nobody cared. So a lot of boyfriends wondering why I would like look over my shoulder before I held their hand, or talk about like, here's what I need to do in case my parents find out that I'm here. I was very much like a hassle to them because they didn't understand how careful I was used to being. And I'm still shedding a lot of that today too. Just still trying to like fully relax in myself.
Sure. Do you feel like in the city, those types of challenges are minimal, or do you feel that it can still be that case sometimes?
I mean, there isn't a gay man in New York City that hasn't been called a faggot out of a car, you know? That's still a very prevalent thing. But there isn't like a hit squad waiting to like kick me out of a job or kick me out of my apartment if they find out that I'm gay. So it's more like a societal, how does the world view you thing, rather than like, here are like actual things that could happen to you that are bad if you continue to exist. So I would say more minimal, but not non-existent challenges.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, in New York, it's been fairly minimal for me. I mean, a big chunk of the city, I mean, there's so many gay people, queer people, especially like in Brooklyn where I live. It's obscene, honestly. Like, Brooklyn is just, it's this, there's sort of like, every city has like different neighborhoods. In New York, you go one block and you're in a different world. It changes so fast. But I've not had too many issues there, even though like the queer neighborhood in Brooklyn is right next to the Hasidic Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn. Like, everyone kind of keeps themselves and does their own thing, and, you know, whatever. It was more for me like where I grew up and like my experience. I still have people that I talk to. I don't know if I call them friends anymore. They were friends who are trying to get me on board to try to get me converted back to Christianity, and trying to get me to say that like my lifestyle is a sin. And I've always wondered, I guess, like, and I don't know if, Isaac, you had any people who tried to convert you out of being gay at college. They were friends or faculty. But it's always for me about like this place of like, not even just because they don't understand, but like a refusal to try and engage with it or to see that it's a valid way to be. I know when I was younger, if someone had said, here's a magic wand that you can wave and you'll be straight, and I would have grabbed it and waved it and been like, done. And now someone gave me that wand, I wouldn't wave it. I would break it in two and throw it away because I'm happy with who I am. I like being gay. It's a part of me that has shaped me. I think it's made me a better person. It's made me more open to people who are way more marginalized than me, to Black people, to Native Americans, to Black trans women who have so much violence and hatred against them out of anyone else in the LGBTQ plus community. And they're the ones who are getting called out by people like J.K. Rowling, who are saying that trans women aren't women. And it's like, you are harming these people. I mean, gay kids, queer kids are way more likely to attempt or commit suicide than their straight counterparts. Way more likely. And when you start adding things, women of color, trans women of color, those numbers just keep going up and up and up. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a white cisgender gay man. In the gay community, I'm like the top of the heap. So it's hard for it. While still being marginalized, I'm still incredibly lucky in that I'm deemed acceptable by heterosexual society.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
There's a standard, like a white heteronormative standard. And the more you go outside of that standard, the more people have to step outside of their own experience to understand you. And some people don't want to do that. Some people would rather try to pull you back into what they understand, which is why we still have people that are trying to convert us back to something that makes sense to them rather than try to understand what we are. And that's why it took my parents 5 years to figure me out, because their whole experience, they didn't think they were going to have a gay son. They never thought about it. And it took them a while to figure out, what do we do now? How do we move over to this area while still staying comfortable in what we've believed our entire lives? And when you add like Black, when you add gay, when you add trans, when you add woman, when you add all of these like minority factors, that's just asking people more and more and more to understand something that is way beyond their experience. So to me, it's not surprising that Black trans women are treated so poorly in this country. And we have a lot of privilege, even though we are in minority communities. Like, I'm a Black gay man. I still have so much more privilege than a Black trans woman, because I'm not asking people to understand too much about what's different between them and myself.
Like you're saying, okay, I'm a man who likes men. That's okay. I can do that. Now, I'm a man who sometimes feels like a woman who also likes men. Okay, what? Now I'm a man who's actually a woman who's going to be who's going to live in my true body, who also likes men and women. And it's like people, I think it scares them, and I think, I don't know where that fear comes from. I read once that, and this was backed up by the people. It was a discussion between a liberal and a conservative. They were both like other philosophers or writers, but people who are conservative minded tend to lead with fear first and kind of keep things very close to the chest. People who are more liberal minded tend to lead first with open-mindedness. And not to say that there can't be closed-minded liberal people, or that there can't be open-minded conservative people. This is, very broad terms, but people don't like to get their boxes pushed. I think it's because we've taken all of these different things of, I'm a Republican, I'm a Methodist, I go to Burger King instead of McDonald's. Stupid example, but we take all of these things and we build them as part of our identity. And so if any of those gets challenged, if our worldview gets challenged, we take it like as a personal attack. We being people who are having, oh my God, that's a gay person. What? You're not sorry? No, I'm not. You're not sorry you're gay. They see it's like we're attacking them when we're just trying to stake out a space for ourselves to live a life.
Yeah.
That's authentic.
Like, it doesn't fit into their descriptions. So all of a sudden, something that's different, and because it's different than the descriptions they have in their own head, it must be wrong, or it just, not that it's not even interesting for them, but it's not even like desirable to begin to understand, because it will force them to change or change these buckets of descriptions that they have about each thing and how it's supposed to be, And I can imagine, as a coach, when I work with parents and teens, especially, I usually invite when a parent calls me about a teen, I bring them both in for the first session. It doesn't matter what, because they're underage and I want the parent to understand. And a lot of the thing is that the parent wants the kid to be who they want them to be. And they're having a hard time mourning the loss of the idea that the child is not who they intended for them to be. Mm-hmm. And they're going crazy, and they're calling me like, here's a life coach, fix my kid. Rather than and that's why I make them come, because we talk about how your ideas are literally persecuting the hell out of your child, and he doesn't want anything to do with you because he feels persecuted by what your definition is and how he should be. And it's life-changing for them. But, I feel like families do that unintentionally because it's an old belief system. And then they see it deteriorate the relationships. Rather than, if you're sad about it, be fucking sad, but get over it and grow your mindset and unlearn the old way, because your kid is flourishing now that they have your support on what in their life, And if I could get parents to understand that more, I think it would be so much easier for teens coming out to be who they really are, right? And work and fight for people. So fight for, all the things that you guys are doing, but it takes like the support of somebody, something, somewhere to make it more welcoming, I guess. So.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. My aunt and uncle were very supportive of me when I came out. There was one day where I went to stay with them because the situation at my house was like untenable. My aunt sat me down and she said, your parents don't hate that you're gay because some book says that it's wrong. They hate that you're gay because they had a plan and you're not following it. And they're using religion as an excuse rather than saying outright, this isn't in the plan. We don't know what to do. They're never going to admit they don't know what to do. They're going to stick by their religion because that's like what religion is for a lot of people, is like compartmentalizing chaos. How do I take everything that's going on in the world and make it make sense for me? And hearing that changed my perspective on a lot of things, because religion kind of like went out the window for me. It was more about what can I do without sacrificing any of my identity to help my parents in this process. And I became a lot more empathetic, and a lot more patient, a lot less argumentative, a lot less thinking like this isn't going to work unless they renounce Christianity too. And I think they saw that change as well, and they became a little more tenable, like from moving to like, we don't want to see anybody that you're dating ever, to like actually buying a bottle of wine for my boyfriend when they came over to have dinner with us once. Things have progressively gotten better just because of that perspective shift. And you're completely right, Heather, that's so important for people to realize that that's what's actually going on in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, it really is when you use the word empathy, it's so important, because when we see people who are in that position, and I think this is important for the Black Lives Matter movement as well. I say that lightly, right? But it's the same. It's not the same at all. But if we don't understand how old shit is in the system, and embrace it in a way of like, let's educate, get the stories out there, talk about this, talk about that. I think it's really hard to crack it, because it's so deeply embedded, so deeply ingrained that we don't even understand it at times, you know? And I feel that, you know, that's what happens with old school mentality in general, you know? So when your child does something, like you said, that wasn't part of my plan, now, you know, I have the responsibility to grieve the loss of that plan, but my child also has the responsibility to understand, like, sorry, I'm being a douchebag right now, but I need some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, but it takes two to understand it. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes it's like, you know, when we do something that's very different than what people are used to, we feel like, yes, I'm doing this. I'm like unstoppable. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But we also need to recognize a little bit, like, some people need a little bit of time because they are stuck. But I love it when we can recognize that they try and they're growing, even if it takes them time, because without that, that reverse support, it's almost like we don't even we're not giving them the chance, I guess, to appropriately like do the process that they also need to do, you know, which is like equally.
I do want to throw in the caveat that my story is like a best case scenario kind of story, where my parents worked on equal footing with me to get towards a better relationship. And that if they hadn't, then it wouldn't have been healthy for me to stay in that relationship. I know plenty of gay people, not just gay people, but people that didn't meet their parents' plan, and their parents refused and like emphatically to change on that plan. And that relationship had to end because of it, because it started to turn into abuse. So
it's a violation of the boundaries. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think, like, I mean, I even had to, you know, the world that I live in as a gay 30-year-old New York City is extremely different than the world that my mom lived in growing up in a small Catholic Italian-American community, where she literally thought that everyone in the world was Italian Catholic because that's what she knew. And so there's been a learning curve for everybody. And like I said, my family's been great. But as I said, everyone has to come to the table to make progress. But we're so ingrained as a society with these attitudes. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I didn't have a word for gay until I was probably 13, 14, you know? So you hit puberty and you're having these thoughts. So I literally thought that every guy was laying in bed thinking about other guys but dated girls because they were expected to. Like that was, I didn't have a concept for it. I didn't know that there were people out there who liked other, like I thought my thoughts on other men was what all my friends had too. You know, I didn't know that they were having these same thoughts on women. I said, what? And that's when I realized, wait a second, not everyone was having these thoughts. That's when I figured out that I might be different. But it's pushing, we have to push back into these, and I don't want to attack the straight men, but this.
No, do it. They deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, like there is so like, have you gotten this eyes of like, oh, when you're talking about someone, you're on a date, oh, are you the boy or the girl in the relationship? How many times have you got? Yeah, we get that all the time. I said, well, neither, we're both men. And then they have to stop. It's really funny to watch people when they say that, because they say it jokingly, and when you call them on it, you watch their wheels spin in real time, and they just go, oh, I mean, they really want to know what you do sexually. And like, I don't care. I'm a very sex positive person. You want to ask me that, whatever. But they're trying to apply the man role, the husband role, to the woman role, the wife role, to gay relationships. And it doesn't work, frankly. But there's gay men who perpetrate it. There's this whole thing where the top buys dinner, which for those of you who don't know, the top is the pitcher, the bottom is the catcher. So you're welcome. Which I think is just idiotic, frankly. But people, even in our community, we're still perpetrating these old gender roles based on dominant masculinity and passive femininity, which, I don't know, what do you think? I don't think that's healthy, but no one.
I think there's reasons behind it. First one is something that you've recognized, Isaac, is it's exhausting to teach people the new, way to see it. So you take something that can be very different and almost put some shade on it to make it almost fit into their image of what they do understand. Right? So, but then it kind of takes away from what actually is happening. Like, that's not what it is at all. Like you said, this is a relationship between two men. There is no wife. Yeah. What the fuck do you find a wife in a relationship with two men? Unless you want to call it that. Like, so I think that we do that to almost sugarcoat the explanation or get them to understand it in their terms, to make it easier. Mm-hmm. We're all responsible for, and changing that.
But there, like, even less so now, I think, but there's still this idea that, gay men are lesser men because we're gay, because we enjoy kissing men, because of any number of sexual things you want to talk about. And, that's, I think it's damaging more so to, not me now, because I've dealt with it, but like to the little boys who are still growing up and trying to be shoehorned into a box where they have to like, trucks and construction vehicles and action figures and, but the girls have like everything in pink and pretty and rainbows, like I grew up building Legos, and my little cousin's going to visit. Her and I are going to play with Legos because Legos are awesome. There's no reason girls should have to have Legos that are only relegated to shades of pink and purple. And there's no reason that boys can't play dress up either. There's, from a young age, we're taught to fit into these. I think it's done innocently. We're taught to shoehorn our kids into boys like blue, girls like pink. Boys do this, girls do that, and we're sorting them. As we said earlier, making expectations for them, building up this life expectation before they've even had a chance to say their first word. Well, you've got a little boyfriend, a little girlfriend. There's two little 1-year-olds who were like playing with each other. It's like, they're one. Leave them alone. They'll figure it out. But we, as a society, put pressure on kids from the get-go, whether it's content or not.
Yeah.
It's convenient. It's convenient to not have to think about what you're saying, to think about what you might be feeding into. And it takes a lot of brain power to actually stop and think like, should I like be gendering this right now?
Yeah.
And then you're thinking about, well, people think I'm ridiculous for doing this because I'm bunking what society says. I'm looking like I'm doing too much for people. And then it just becomes like, it's like a force of will to actually bunk those stereotypes. And it won't be easier until everyone's doing it. And everyone's not going to do it either.
And that's the thing. And I think it comes back to like the fear is fear. I think people generally fear change. I think one of the reasons that, and I will get political because frankly, being gay in America is a political act. But one of the reasons that Donald Trump won was because in 2016, was because he pushed this idea of a 1950s Americana that never really existed except for a handful of really privileged white people. And he pushed this idea on us. But do we want to go back to the day when women are doing coke to get housework done, and maybe the drinking in the office all day? That one, I could take. Thank you, Mad Men, for that idea. But
Black people being second-class citizens,
right? I mean,
as if they are. I mean, they still are.
Still are.
But it would look different.
Yeah, it's more noticeable. We've gotten better at like sugarcoating things. Like, I give companies a lot of credit in one hand because there's a lot more gay representation in media and advertisement and pride sponsorships. But at the same time, the only reason that those are there is the company said, oh shit, these people aren't going away. We need to make money. So we're going to be pro-gay. And I'm sure there are companies and people who are doing companies who are pro-gay and they show where they donate, and that's great. But there's also a lot of companies who slap a rainbow filter on their logo and say we're pro-gay when it's really just all about chasing profits, which thanks. But you gotta walk the walk too.
And how many companies this year, when all the Pride festivals are canceled, decided not to do any rainbow flags because there's no money to be made?
Yeah. Last year, walking through Soho, every single storefront had rainbow this, rainbow that, rainbow this. And it's like, we're watching. And particularly the generation below us, thank you for this weekend, by the way, Gen Z, they're watching even more. And like, I saw this a few years ago. I was in Hot Topic with my best friend who is a lesbian and has the fashion sense of a teenage boy. So we were in Hot Topic. And there was these two high school guys, and then they were flirting. And they said, oh, I'm going to break up with you if you don't be nice to me. And they gave a little high school peck. And my heart was just like, oh my God, there's these two teenage boys in high school who are being gay in the mall where I grew up going to. And I was just like, yes, live your lives and be proud of that. Don't be ashamed. And that just made me so happy to see that, because it shows that, progress is being made.
Have you ever gotten caught staring? I've gotten caught so many times, just like, living vicariously through these teenagers, and I'm just like, and like feeling like you have to apologize for like intruding on their lives, but like
no, I'm just savoring the moment.
Like, oh my God, am I the older gay now? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, 30, old gay, dead, done. It's bad.
Like almost wishing that you had done that at a younger age.
Oh my God, like when I first came out, there's this old website called Connection. Isaac, were you heard of that?
No, it's before my time.
Rude. But it was a social networking site for gay people, and it was like there's like a version for the Trevor Project, which is it's a advocacy for LGBTQ youth. But there's like a Facebook version for gay people, and I went on there, and I was able to I still have friends today that I met from there, because I wasn't going there was no Grindr, there wasn't any dating apps, or you weren't putting on Facebook, there was no gay group. So it's like people had to make like these little corners of the internet for themselves to exist in. And so I remember going on there and being like, oh, there's this whole new, but you do have to learn. The gay community, it has its own rules too. And, I remember being like, I have no idea what any of this terminology means. We speak in code. Like there's this whole thing. It's like, oh, I'm a baby. You think you're all hot shit when you graduate high school. It's like, oh no, you have so much to learn.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is like when you are closeted, and I didn't have the closeted experience. I came out like an hour after I realized I was gay. So I don't have that experience of like knowing when you're 13 and not telling anybody until you're 17. But if you're one of those people, you suddenly see that there is this community of people like you that's completely accessible, and you haven't belonged anywhere since you realized you were gay. You knew that you didn't fit anywhere, and suddenly you fit somewhere. So of course you're going to adopt every single convention that's happening in that community. You're going to because you want to blend in finally somewhere. And I think that there's a lot of good in that. I think there's also a lot of bad in that, as we talked about this heteronormative stereotypes that are perpetuated in the gay community. I think a lot of that gets just adopted, and it's completely subconscious. And something that needs to be checked pretty hard. But it's also, like you said, this community that you didn't realize was there, that you now see, like, finally I can fit somewhere. Finally, I have a box that I can fit in, but still needing to deconstruct exactly what is in that box and if it should be in there.
Yeah. For people who like may not be privy to the inner workings of the gay community, there's this whole thing where, you know, mask for mask, which is a thing, like it means masculine, like people don't like guys who are too feminine, or people don't like guys who are too fat or too skinny or too hairy or too, like we still put ourselves as a community into lots of little boxes based on body type and sexual preference and masculinity or femininity or androgyny, and it's a whole thing to navigate. And I think in one way it's like it's what's normal for us, but I think it's also, as Isaac said, a bit of a problem because, you know, we're subdividing ourselves.
Kind of what you're just saying right now almost exists in everybody's box, I guess. Like, yeah. And I think it really has to do with an insecurity deep within ourselves. And when we are insecure about certain things within ourselves, like we almost see these judgments that we hold on other people, you know, and I don't think that they would be there necessarily if we were 100% confident within ourselves. But that goes back to the subconscious of how we're raised, what we're taught to deal with, what we're taught to look at as appropriate or not. And that's almost like you talk about, you know, something in the system of like what we're watching, what we're seeing on TV as we grow up, what we're sorry, I'm choking on my own saliva right now. Yeah. So it's, and I mean, what we're allowed to talk about as well. Like, I think when you talk about confusion around sex, like having to identify like, oh, there must be a wife, there must be a man, there must be a, you know, whatever. You know, when we start to biologically feel like having sex or experience sexual experiences, we're told absolutely don't touch it. It's wrong. It's bad. It's not, you're going straight to hell. But yet you go home at the end of the day of school and you're like, I'm 16 years old and I feel like insanely horny and I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm not feel that way, you know? So we kind of almost confuse teens, what they should be feeling, how they should be feeling, what they should be attracted to, all these things based on outside things and TV, you know, whatever it is. So, but yeah, again, back to the subconscious of like, you know, don't cry, you're crying like a girl, or you're, you know, play and do the, you know, so it's.
You throw like a girl.
That's not just like to gay men or to gay women in general. That's amongst humans in general. Yeah, honestly. Sadly.
Everybody's just trying to fit in somewhere and to stay in there once you're in there. Yeah. Because recognizing that you shouldn't tell your kid, like, don't throw like a girl, that means that you're taking a step out of the box that you've been in. And that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
It change happens slowly, but you know, I mean, the protests have shown that change can happen faster if people push for it. I mean, if you look at gay history, like 100 years ago, you could be jailed for acting on homosexual desires. I mean, it was like literally a crime in a bunch of different countries and in a bunch of different states in America. And now today you can see TV shows and ads and stuff with happy gay people in it. So, you know, progress has been made. And I think it's really funny because, not funny, that our community, the gay community, has made so much progress, especially in the last couple of decades, when the Black community's progress has been, even though they make a much bigger swath of the population, we think, their progress has been so much slower. And
well, it goes back to that you can be gay but still be a white man, and white men have the most privilege. So of course privilege is going to come faster for a sexual minority that isn't like, you don't have to like, no, like you can't necessarily look at someone and be like, you're gay, in the same way that you can look at someone and say you're Black. Like,
yeah, you can't hide the color of your skin. Yeah. And that's, I think, where, you know, especially in the queer community, there's a lot of bigotry and racism in the gay community as well. We are by no means a perfect community, and it is a problem. But there are also a lot of people, particularly people who are not, there's been a lot of gay white men who've been doing it, but especially the lesbian community, you know, bisexual community, pansexual community, genderqueer community, trans community, who have been marching shoulder to shoulder and been pushing vocally for changes for heterosexual and homosexual Black people in this country, because you realize that we have a lot more in common than we do different. And I think that that's, I need to let Isaac talk more about this because this is more his issue than mine, but it's nice to see that for me, honestly.
I think once you've gotten that momentum of stepping out of your own box, it's a lot easier to keep moving when you see that movement needs to be made. But there's also the trap of thinking that because you are in this minority place, that like I know a lot of gay people that have said like, I can't be racist, I'm gay. There's no correlation there at all. But you think that just because you also like suffer because you are in a minority community means that you can ignore other minority communities that are still different than you, communities that you still have privilege over or compared to. So it's a lot easier to, again, because this takes work and it's exhausting, it's a lot easier to become complacent when you are in a minority position. Like if you're a gay man, it's a lot easier to ignore Black issues and I honestly think it's a lot more gay men ignore it compared to straight men. Just because they're also devoting a lot of brain power and a lot of space and energy to existing in their own communities as they are. So it's a bigger ask too, to ask a gay man to also care about the Black community, a community that they're not a part of. So it's give and take in that we could potentially be more understanding, but that we're also having a little bit less energy to actually do the work involved.
Yeah, that's awesome. This has been some awesome conversation. Where would you say for your guys' self, like what has been the most growth that you've witnessed within yourself and those around you?
It was for me, I was with my grandfather who passed away a few years ago, and my mom was struggling really hard with not accepting my sexuality, but working on like basically trying to adjust her view of me, and what my life was going to look like. Because it wasn't going to end up with me getting married and having 2.5 kids and a wife, and it wasn't going to be that. And she told my grandfather, and she said, I don't know what to do. And he told her, love him more because life will be harder. And I think, and I have that tattooed on my wrist in his handwriting because it's just really, it healed our relationship. And he was 89 when he said that, from a generation that really did not deal with homosexuality. And I think that lesson, that can be applied to anybody, because we don't know we don't know what path people are walking until we've walked in their shoes. I will never understand Isaac's experience as a Black gay person because I will never have that experience. I'll never understand a transsexual person's experience because I'm not trans. But if we lead with love and accepting and meeting people where they are, unless you're a racist piece of shit, then we're going to try and change you or cancel you. But people who are trying to live their authentic lives and be good people to other people, meeting them where they're and leading with love first, even if you don't understand or can't relate, that doesn't mean you can't be supportive. And for me, it was finding that peace in myself and then applying that to people who are even more marginalized than me has been where I've seen the most growth for myself.
Awesome.
For me, I think the most personal growth I've seen is just how I've changed from who I was before I came out to who I am today. Before I came out, I was very much like a people pleaser, wanting everybody to like me and changing however I needed to in order to make that happen. When I first came out, I overcompensated very hard and went to I'm going to make you like me as I am right now, which not the most friendly, not the most welcoming, not the person you really want to be around. And moving back a little bit more into an I will be okay if you don't like me place, which I think is much, much healthier and has done a lot for my self-confidence and being somebody that people consider to be extremely authentic. And my relationships, because of that shift, have gotten a lot stronger and a lot healthier. And I am much, much happier being confident in myself and knowing that the people that matter are the ones that will be okay with it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love that. You guys said something very different, but yet it all comes down to love. And when you said it, Kyle, you lead with love. And when you said it, Isaac, it was more about loving myself more than worrying about what somebody else is going to love about me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so crucial because when somebody talks about, you know, relationships with other people, I think the most important relationship we have to have is with ourselves, and it's led by the love for ourselves. And with that, when we lead forward, we can understand our own challenges, our own quirks, and that how important it is for our own happiness that we also allow others to lead with love that they have for themselves as well. And that means they define that, I define mine, you define yours, and then we can all live amongst each other. And that's something a lot of people miss. They're not getting that. So I think I'm super excited about everything that's going on right now in the United States and the world. Because and I would really encourage people to look at what they love about themselves. And how if they feel threatened, if that feels threatened, then it's something they need to look at within themselves versus how they're going to change somebody else. Right. And, I'm excited for that. I think it's the first time that, you know, in a larger mass, this is happening. So,
we only meet people where they are, you know, and everyone, the gay agenda is to live your life, honestly, and just be happy, you know, and defund the police. But other than that, you know, it's mostly I want to live my life and figure out whatever makes me happy. And that's going to be different than anybody else. But why do I deserve less happiness because I happen to be attracted to men?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everybody just wants to be comfortable. Everybody.
Yes.
And some people already are, and some people want to be.
Yep.
Yeah. And if you're not comfortable because of somebody else's lifestyle, look at yourself and ask, why am I not comfortable because of that?
Yep.
Look at it for yourself.
Yeah. It's not on them to change to make you feel more comfortable. That's an internal, and people don't, that's, as I said, that's hard. People don't want to change, especially not for some stranger on the internet or whatever. They don't want to, I'm not going to change for them. They don't, you know, people think that the gay community doesn't touch them, but I would be really hard pressed to find anyone in this country who doesn't know a queer person, whether they know it or not. Like it would be really, really hard to find someone like that.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I can guarantee it's more often than not that it's somebody you know and love, and they don't accept it yet because of your hate, you know, and that's
Yep.
that reality.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so last closing thoughts, something that you could each share quickly that would be, you know, if there's one thing that you could share with everybody, like a message of inspiration, what would it be?
I'm gonna default love people more, meet them where they are, and you're not always gonna understand, but that doesn't mean you can't support them.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the thing I like to tell people is when you're going through a shitty time in life, I personally, my worldview is that there's a balance to everything, and you can't know what an absolute shit day is without knowing what the opposite is, a great day. So when you are going through those really shitty times, know that means that at some point things are amazing, and that because you've experienced it already, you can experience it again. And when you finally do have that day that everything is going amazingly, remember that shitty time and look how far you've come.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It reminds me of one comment you had, Kyle, earlier, and you said something when you realized you were different.
Mm-hmm.
And I challenge that thought, because realizing you were different, no. Realizing that you were you, right? Versus being just different than this, you know, what should be expected of us.
I would say normal is not a fixed point. It's a perspective. And every single person has a normal that's unique to them. Our societal normal is based on, I don't know, I guess, mass agreement, but that can change, and it does change, and it should change. You know, and what's normal for one community might be different for another. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. You know, I was figuring myself out there.
Yeah. And I think it's another like use of words, right? We're used to using words like that. Yeah. But as people accept who they are, it's coming to terms with, you know what, I'm not different. I'm just, and maybe it's different than them next to me, but it doesn't mean that it's in a bad
negative connotation.
Yeah. Cool. Well, also, all right, one more thing. There is so many things I could go on, but I don't want to go too long. But
we can do a part 2. It's fine.
Well, I just remembered. So when we talked about this a little bit before we went live, how it's exhausting to go through these movements, right? And especially with the BLM going on right now. And we want, people who don't have or are not looked at as less than, right? We don't want them to take the lead. We want them in supportive roles, right? How can we make it better? So how can people who are not in your position but do have a voice or do have the power to say something or make a difference, how can they support anyone in the community of the in the gay community in general, trans community, all the umbrella of everyone? Okay.
I would say that just like any community, gay people are not a monolith, and there's no universal gay experience that we all share. It's going to look different for everybody. So my advice is to ask your gay friends specifically what they need, and they will tell you. And then just do that if you can.
Nice.
I mean, I would agree. I think in general is try not to purport to report stereotypes, and people educate yourselves. Gay history is a thing. There's a bajillion books out there about about where we've come from and who we are as a community. As I said, we're not a monolith, but
we didn't just show up in the 60s.
Right. There's been kings and princes and statesmen and artists and writers all throughout history that we know are at least, a little queer, and understanding that we're not new is important,
Yeah. So a couple comments here on Facebook before we close off. Sean is here saying you are all beautiful.
Oh,
thank you.
My cousin.
And then Nora Smith is here saying your grandfather was such a beautiful man. You're so blessed to have him in your life.
I know. And you too.
Yeah. And then Sean corrected her spelling error. She's going to kill me.
Yeah.
But you guys, thank you so much for sharing this. I know sometimes these stories are not easy for people to hear or tell, but it's important that they're told. And I really hope that anyone out there that is struggling with any sort of challenge that they think isn't worth the fight, they can see it's worth the fight and it matters. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me tonight. Right in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I have nothing to do this whole week, so this is going to be the highlight, honestly.
Right, exactly.
I'm actually wearing pants. Like, I don't think you understand how monumental this is for me right now. So.
Awesome. Well, so anyhow, moving forward, guys, I'm due for a baby 2 weeks from this past weekend. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen 2 weeks from today, if I'm going to have. So if I do, you will know. If I don't, you will know. So I am super thankful for this first year with all of you viewers watching and sharing and supporting the many, many stories of Unstoppable You, the podcast with me, your host, Heather Beebe, where we have unstoppable people, unstoppable stories, unstoppable you right here on Disruption Network. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening.